Thanks. It's my honor to introduce Senator Cruz. So Senator Cruz did say that he would be available to take some questions at the end of his remarks. So what we'll do is when he's finished with his remarks, I'll come back up. And if you have a question, if you'd raise your hand and I will recognize you. And if you'd do me a favor and wait for the microphone so everybody can hear your question. And if you just state your name and affiliation, that would be awesome. Senator Ted Cruz from the really great state of Texas serves on the Committee of Commerce, Science, Transportation, Committee on Armed Services, Judiciary, Joint Economic Committee, and the Committee on Rules. Before being elected to the United States Senate, he received national acclaim as the Solicitor General of Texas, the state's chief law enforcement officer. Before the U.S. Supreme Court, he served under the Attorney General Greg Abbott, and he was the nation's youngest Solicitor General and the longest-serving Solicitor General in Texas and the first Hispanic Solicitor General of Texas. In private practice, he spent 5 years as a partner of the nation's largest law firm, where he led the firm's U.S. Supreme Court and national appellate litigation practice. He's authored more than 80 Supreme Court briefs and argued 43 oral arguments, including 9 before the U.S. Supreme Court. From 2004 to 2009, he taught Supreme Court litigation as an adjunct professor at the University of Texas Law School. And prior to that, he serves as Director of Office of Policy Planning at the Federal Trade Commission, as Associate Deputy General at the U.S. Department of Justice, and as Domestic Policy Advisor on the 2008 Bush-Cheney campaign. Obviously can't hold a job. He graduated with, just saying, he graduated with honors from Princeton University and high honors from Harvard Law School, and served as a law clerk for Chief Justice William Rehnquist on the U.S. Supreme Court. So please join with me in welcoming Senator Ted Cruz.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning. Good morning. It is great to be with so many good friends at Heritage. Heritage is such a jewel in this country, such a font of ideas and creative thinking and energy that I believe is needed to change the direction of this country. It's also particularly fitting that we're here today, and in just a few months, we will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of one of Ronald Reagan's most important speeches, a speech that he gave right here at this institution, initiating an endowment drive that led to so much good in Reagan's times and our own. At that speech, Reagan discussed the present challenges, including the threat of terrorism. And in particular, he talked about the corrective that the U.S. Air Force had just sent to Colonel Gaddafi in Libya, encouraging him to give up terrorism. The corrective came in the form of a military jet and a bomb down his front porch. But I especially liked President Reagan's description of how one of his most famous appointees, UN Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick, once explained to the rest of the world what it meant to have conservatives in charge of foreign policy. First, he talked about the U.S. government's approach towards terrorism. Quote, "No nation, friend or foe, ally or adversary, should be surprised by the events of last week," he said of the recent and deliberate bombing. His actions made clear his determination to protect American lives and the world from terrorism. And then he singled out Ambassador Kirkpatrick. And yet, even at the start of the administration, people like Jeane Kirkpatrick were offering some pretty broad hints that things will be different. How will the Reagan administration change American foreign policy? She was asked in 1981 at the United Nations. She answered correctly. She said, "Well, we've taken down our kick me sign." And someone said, "Well, does this mean that if the United States is kicked, it will kick back?" "Not necessarily," she said, "but it does mean we won't apologize." Well, we haven't been apologizing. Things are different, and perhaps you've noticed. I know Colonel Gaddafi has. That was Reagan here at Heritage 30 years ago. Challenges that Ronald Reagan and Jeane Kirkpatrick faced in their times were daunting. First and foremost, the threat of Soviet communism, a threat that many in America thought could not be beaten. We were told that on an almost daily basis by elected officials, by academics, by those in the media. But with a focus, a determination, and an unshakable belief in the greatness of our exceptional nation, President Reagan won the Cold War. Today, we're once again facing challenging times, both at home and abroad. Again, we face an aggressive enemy whose goal is nothing less than the eradication of our very way of life. And there are many in this country who fear once again that we cannot defeat this enemy, that to even speak its name labels us bigots. It reminds me of that line from the movie The Usual Suspect. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. It seems when it comes to President Obama and Hillary Clinton, radical Islamic terrorism is something that just doesn't exist. But the rest of us living on terra firma, living in the real world, are aware that it is real, it is growing, and it is profoundly dangerous. What America needs today is a moment of clarity. Our enemy is radical Islamic terrorism, and this is an enemy that can and will be defeated. As we enter the final year of the Obama administration, proof for all that there is indeed a God. There is little hope that this president will rise to the challenge, and a much greater likelihood that his successor will be dealing with an even more dangerous world than what we face today. Two key issues will demand the attention of our next president: keeping America safe at home and strong abroad. Ensuring both should be the basic responsibility and the first priority of any commander-in-chief. The recent terrorist attacks on Paris and San Bernardino have brought front and center the issue of radical Islamic terrorism. But the fact of the matter is that the problem has been festering unattended for the entire Obama administration. For President Obama, however, such issues are peripheral at best to his core progressive agenda, an agenda that appeases our enemies before actually defending the national security interest of our great country. While the President and his secretaries of state have chosen to ignore the problem and to recede from global leadership, terrorist groups like ISIS have mobilized and carried out a string of deadly attacks around the globe. It is worth noting that the attack on San Bernardino has been called the deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. 14 innocent lives murdered. That depiction is actually incorrect. We've had one other terror attack on U.S. soil that took 14 lives. And it occurred in my home state of Texas at Fort Hood on November 9th, 2009. That likewise claimed 14 lives. The littlest victim, the unborn baby of Private Francesca Valdez, was brutally murdered along with her mother as Nadal Hassan shouted Allahu Akbar. The Obama administration responded to this unspeakable terrorist attack by labeling it workplace violence. One of the things I am most proud of my tenure in the Senate is introducing legislation in the Senate Armed Services Committee to mandate that the victims of the Fort Hood shooting receive the Purple Heart, and against the active opposition of the Obama Pentagon. I was very pleased to earn the support of both Democrats and Republicans on the Armed Services Committee. We passed that legislation into law in December, and in April of this year, finally the Purple Heart was awarded to those victims of terrorism. Whether it's Fort Hood, San Bernardino, or a number of others tragically in between, from Little Rock to Boston, to Garland to Chattanooga. President Obama's approach has been to treat each one in isolation. The administration has called the perpetrators lone wolves, not to be associated with formal groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS because they didn't receive direct orders from them. They investigate any suspects, but they ignore the reality that our nation is under attack. What America needs today, just as we needed in the late 1970s, is first a firm resolve to always protect Americans' freedom here at home, freedom that has made this the greatest nation on the face of the planet. But second, we need moral clarity that starts with defining the enemy. And third, we restore America's leadership in the world through a position of strength.